You wake in the dead of night, gasping, your skin slick with cold sweat. The room is empty, silent, but something feels off. Not just the remnants of a bad dream, something deeper, a presence, a knowing. Then you see it, in the dim light filtering through the curtains. Your shadow stretches across the wall, contorted and jagged. It shouldn't be moving, but it is, subtly, just enough for your heart to hammer against your ribs. And then, something impossible. It speaks, not with words, but with an understanding that cuts deeper than language. You feel it in your bones, in the spaces between your thoughts. A silent whisper curling around your mind, unraveling everything you think you are. I know you, not the version you show the world, not the curated persona built from carefully chosen words and cautious actions. No, it knows the raw, unfiltered truth, the thoughts you swallow, the impulses you deny, the fears that knot themselves into your stomach at 3 a.m. It knows the version of you that even you refuse to face. And it asks, do you? That question lingers, heavy, suffocating, because in that moment, a terrifying realization begins to form. What if everything you believe about yourself is a carefully crafted illusion? What if your true nature has been watching from the dark, unseen but ever present, shaping your every thought, every action without your awareness? What if the shadow knows you better than you know yourself? And if that's true, then who or what have you been living as? You've felt it before, haven't you? That unsettling moment when you catch yourself saying something you don't quite mean, but it slips out anyway, like a voice that isn't fully yours. The flicker of a cruel thought you'd never admit aloud. But there it is, rising unbidden from the depths. The inexplicable rush of satisfaction at someone else's misfortune. The eerie sense that something inside you is watching, waiting. A part of you that shouldn't exist, but does. We call it many things. The subconscious, the ID, the animal instinct. But one name has followed it through history, whispered in fear and fascination. The shadow, not the one cast by light, but the one buried deep within, the unseen self. The fragmented reflection of everything we suppress, deny, and fear. And yet, this shadow is not merely an abstract idea. It is real, it is alive, and it has been shaping your life in ways you cannot yet comprehend. Think about it. How many of your choices have been truly yours? How much of your identity is merely a performance, carefully constructed to fit into the expectations of others? You tell yourself you are good, kind, in control, but beneath that polished exterior, something else stirs. Something ancient, something raw. And if that hidden force holds the reins, if the shadow truly knows you better than you do, then the question is no longer just who are you, but rather, who is in control? There is a reason we fear the dark, not because of what might be lurking outside, but because of what stirs within. The hidden self that slips through the cracks, surfacing in ways you barely notice, a biting remark, a self-sabotaging decision, a night spent staring at the ceiling, haunted by thoughts you can't explain. You've been told to resist it, to ignore it, to push it away. But what if the only way forward is not to escape the shadow, but to face it? Because the truth is, it has never been the shadow that fears the light. It is you who fears what you might see. And so, we must go deeper, into the origins of this unseen force, into the psychological and philosophical truths that reveal why it exists and what it wants from you. The hidden problem and its psychological/philosophical roots. You were not born afraid of your own reflection. As a child, you were raw, untamed, without shame, without hesitation. You laughed when you felt joy, screamed when you felt anger, and wept when sorrow overtook you. There was no mask to wear, no false self to maintain. Every emotion, every impulse was allowed its place. But then the world stepped in. They told you that some emotions were wrong, that certain thoughts made you bad, that parts of yourself were unacceptable. And so, piece by piece, You began to carve yourself into something else. The anger that once roared inside you, you were told it was dangerous. So you learned to smile when you wanted to scream. The desires that flickered in the dark corners of your mind, you were told they were shameful. So you buried them beneath layers of control. The unfiltered, unedited truth of who you were told it was too much, too raw, too unfit for the world. And so, you began to create a version of yourself that could be accepted, a version that would be loved, praised, admired. You became what they wanted you to be. But the parts you rejected, they did not disappear. They sank deep into the hidden recesses of your mind, forming the thing that watches from the darkness, the thing we call the shadow. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst who dared to peer into the abyss of the human psyche, called this the shadow self, the unconscious, repressed part of our being that contains all the desires, fears, and truths we refuse to acknowledge. But Jung did not see the shadow as merely an enemy. No, he saw it as the key, the hidden force shaping our choices, our relationships, even our very sense of identity. Because the truth is, you do not control what you suppress. It controls you. When you deny your anger, it does not vanish, it festers. It leaks out in passive aggression, in self-sabotage, in unexplained resentment. When you repress your desires, they do not dissolve. They manifest in distorted ways. In addictions, in obsessions, in choices that make no rational sense but feel irresistible in the moment. When you refuse to face your darkness, you do not become free. You become its prisoner. Friedrich Nietzsche warned of this very trap when he wrote, "Beware that, when fighting monsters, you do not become a monster yourself. For when you gaze long into the abyss also gazes into you." But what if the abyss is not an enemy? What if the thing you fear, the thing you have spent your life running from, is not some external monster, but the most honest version of you? Look at your life. How many of your struggles stem not from external forces, but from the parts of yourself you refuse to acknowledge? You tell yourself you are a good person. But why? Then, do you sometimes feel a quiet pleasure at another's misfortune? You tell yourself you are strong. But why? Then, does a single word from the right person send you spiraling? You tell yourself you know what you want. But why? Then, do you find yourself making choices that seem to betray you? Could it be that the real battle has never been with the world, but with yourself? And if so, what does the shadow want from you? What if it has never been your enemy at all? What if, instead of something to fear, the shadow is something to understand? And what if, by refusing to face it, you are not protecting yourself, but losing yourself? There is a reason why the world tells you to suppress the shadow. Because if you were to truly confront it, if you were to integrate it, to own it, to become whole once more, you would no longer be controllable. You would no longer live in fear. You would no longer be a prisoner of the masks you wear. And so, the question is no longer whether the shadow exists. The question is, what happens when you finally turn to face it? The answer lies in the unseen consequences of ignoring what lurks beneath. The price of keeping the shadow buried is higher than you think. And whether you realize it or not, you are already paying it. The unseen consequences. You think you are in control, that your choices are yours alone, that your beliefs, your reactions, your desires, they are shaped by reason, by conscious will. But what if that's the greatest illusion of all? What if the unseen, unacknowledged parts of you, the ones you've spent your life suppressing, are the real architects of your fate? And what if every moment of pain, every unexplained impulse, every instance where you sabotage yourself is not random? What if it is the shadow pulling the strings, punishing you for pretending it does not exist? The lies you tell yourself. Think about the last time you overreacted. Someone said something small, an offhand comment, a criticism, and suddenly, something inside you snapped. Maybe you lashed out. Maybe you withdrew. Maybe the words replayed in your mind for hours, days, poisoning everything else. But why? Why did it cut so deep? Because the words themselves were not the wound. They only touched the wound, the one you refuse to acknowledge. The insecurity you hide behind bravado. The fear of failure you mask with perfectionism. The old childhood pain that never really healed, only buried. You tell yourself the problem is external, that they were out of line, that the world is unfair. But deep down, the truth is simpler. You are at war with yourself. And the parts of you that you have locked away, the fears, the anger, the desires, the pain, are finding ways to break free. Not in ways you control, but in ways that control you. The patterns you can't escape. How many times have you found yourself trapped in the same situation? Again and again, as if drawn by some invisible force? The same kind of toxic relationship. The same cycle of self-doubt and procrastination. The same destructive habits, no matter how hard you try to change. It feels like fate, doesn't it? Like something outside of you is orchestrating these moments, pulling you into the same pain, the same failures, the same regrets. But what if it isn't fate? What if it's the shadow demanding to be seen? Jung warned of this when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." You are not trapped by destiny. You are trapped by your own refusal to see yourself fully. Because the shadow is not simply what you repress. It is what you secretly crave. The chaos, the destruction, the comfort of familiar suffering. A part of you, deep, unspoken, hidden, wants the pain. Because at least the pain is yours. At least it is known. At least it feels real. And so, the cycle repeats. Not because you are cursed, but because the shadow always finds a way. The mask is slipping. No matter how carefully you construct your persona, no matter how tightly you hold on to your ideal self, the shadow will emerge. In your most private thoughts, in the words that slip before you can catch them, in the choices that don't make sense but feel inevitable. Because the shadow does not die in the dark. It grows. It learns how to manipulate you, how to whisper in ways you won't notice, how to wear your own voice so that you mistake its whispers for your own thoughts. And the more you deny it, the more power it has. A repressed shadow is not a weakened shadow. It is a dangerous one, because when it finally erupts, when it forces you to acknowledge it, you may not be able to control the destruction it brings. Look at history. The tyrants who claimed to be saviors, the moralists who hid their darkest sins, the men and women who lived their entire lives in denial, only for their truth to come crashing down in the end. They were not special. They were merely the ones who ran from their shadow for too long. And the longer you run, the greater the fall. So ask yourself, how much of your life is truly yours? And how much has been dictated by the shadow you refuse to face? Because sooner or later, you will have to confront it. The only question is whether you will do it before it destroys everything. But what if? What if there was another way? What if instead of fearing the shadow, you could make it your ally? To do that, you must learn to rebel, not against it, but with it. And in doing so, you might just set yourself free. Are you ready to break the chains? The rebellion. How to break free. You were never meant to live in a cage. Not the kind made of steel and stone, but the invisible one. The one built from expectations, from shame, from the quiet, suffocating pressure to be who you are supposed to be. For years, you have played the role, the version of yourself that is presentable, acceptable, safe. But deep down, something inside you has always known the truth. You are more than the mask you wear. And if you want to be free, if you want to reclaim yourself from the prison of fear and repression, you must do something radical. You must turn and face the shadow, not as an enemy, but as the missing piece of yourself. The first step, admitting the lie. Look into a mirror, not just at your reflection, but through it, past the face you recognize, past the performance, past the illusion you have built so well you almost believe it, and ask, what am I hiding from myself? Because the truth is, you already know. Maybe it's the anger you pretend doesn't exist, the resentment that simmers beneath your forced patience. Maybe it's the hunger for more, the ambition, the power, the desire that you've told yourself is selfish, wrong. Maybe it's the fear, the gnawing terror, That if you stop pretending for even 1 second, everything will collapse. Whatever it is yours. You can keep denying it, keep burying it, or you can do what most people never dare to do. You can own it. The second step, speaking the forbidden truth. The things you hide have power over you only as long as they remain hidden. So say it, out loud. The truth you have never dared to admit, not to others, not even to yourself. The part of you that enjoys the pain of others. The part of you that craves control. The part of you that resents those closest to you. It will feel wrong, uncomfortable, a betrayal of the person you pretend to be. But in that discomfort, something happens. The shadow stops whispering. It stops clawing at the edges of your mind, trying to be heard. Because for the first time in your life, you are listening. And with that, the war inside you begins to shift. The third step, reclaiming the power. You have been told that your darkness makes you weak, that your impulses, your hidden thoughts, your secret rage, they are things to be fought, to be shamed, to be crushed. But that was a lie. The shadow is not your weakness. It is your strength. Do you think the great figures of history, the warriors, the visionaries, the revolutionaries, were free of darkness? No, they were the ones who embraced it, who understood that their rage, their ambition, their raw, primal instincts were not things to be feared, but things to be wielded. Nietzsche called this the will to power, the ability to take all that is inside you, even the most forbidden, most dangerous parts, and turn it into something unstoppable. And so, you must ask yourself, what would happen if you stopped fighting the shadow and started using it? The final step, becoming whole. To embrace the shadow is not to become reckless. It is not to surrender to chaos or indulge in cruelty. It is to integrate, to become whole, to acknowledge your anger, but not let it blind you, to recognize your desire, but not let it consume you, to face your fear, but not let it chain you. Because when you do this, when you own yourself fully, you stop being a puppet of hidden forces. You stop being controlled by impulses you do not understand. You stop being at war with yourself. And for the first time, you become who you were always meant to be. No more masks, no more fear, no more chains, only truth. And that truth is power. The shadow never wanted to destroy you. It only wanted to be acknowledged, to be heard, to be accepted. And now, you stand at the threshold of something terrifying, something exhilarating, a life where you are no longer fragmented, no longer afraid, no longer running from yourself. But there is one last truth to face, the final revelation, the one thing that will change everything, the ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization. There is something you must understand, something that changes everything. You were never just light, and you were never just darkness. You are both. And for all this time, you have been at war with yourself, because the world told you that you had to be only one thing. That to be good, you must cut away the parts of you that are dangerous. That to be accepted, you must abandon the parts that do not fit. That to be worthy of love, you must carve yourself into something smaller, something safer, something false. But here is the truth that was hidden from you. You were never meant to be divided. The great lie that has kept you caged, every force that has ever sought to control you, society, institutions, even your own upbringing, has relied on the same deception, that there is such a thing as a good self and a bad self, that some emotions are pure while others are poison, that your desires, your anger, your ambition, your power, these are things to be feared, to be tamed, to be locked away. But that was never about your well-being. It was about control, because a person who does not know themselves, who does not own the totality of who they are, is easy to manipulate. A person at war with themselves will never rise. And that is why they made you afraid of your own reflection. Because if you were to truly see yourself, all of yourself, you would be unstoppable. The final revelation, you are not one, but two. Look inside. The person you think you are, the one you present to the world, the one who plays by the rules, who seeks approval, who tries so desperately to be good, that is only half of you. And then there is the other, the one who lurks beneath, the one who rages in silence, the one who knows what it truly wants but has been forced into the shadows. The world told you that this side of you is a monster, but it isn't. It is your power. The only reason it has ever frightened you is because you have never learned to control it. You have spent your life running from it, suppressing it, trying to kill it. But what if? What if the shadow was never your enemy? What if it was the missing piece? What if the only way to become whole was to stop resisting and finally embrace what has been waiting for you all along? The moment of transformation. Imagine it. A version of yourself that no longer flinches at the truth. A version of yourself that no longer carries the weight of hidden shame. A version of yourself that does not fear its own reflection. What would that feel like? No more self-sabotage. No more endless cycles of guilt and repression. No more being a puppet to forces you do not understand. Just pure, undeniable power. The power of knowing exactly who you are. The power of being able to act, not out of fear, not out of compulsion, but out of true, unshakable choice. That is what the shadow was trying to show you all along. Not that you are dark, not that you are light, but that you are both. And only when you accept this, do you finally become free. The shadow knew before you did. It has been watching, waiting, not to destroy you, but to remind you that the real prison was never the shadow. The real prison was your fear of it. And now, that fear is gone. Now, you stand at the threshold of something new. A self that is no longer divided. A self that no longer plays by the rules of the cage. A self that is whole. Because the shadow never wanted to control you. It only wanted to show you the truth. And now, you know. So tell me, who are you now? And now, you stand at the edge of understanding, no longer a stranger to yourself. The shadow was never your enemy. It was never something to be feared or destroyed. It was only waiting for you to listen, to acknowledge, to reclaim the parts of yourself you once buried. Because true freedom, true power, does not come from pretending to be only light. It comes from embracing the totality of who you are. So I leave you with one final question. Now that you see the truth, what will you do with it? If this journey resonated with you, if it made you question, reflect, or see yourself in a new way, then don't keep it to yourself. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to keep exploring the hidden forces that shape your mind, your choices, and your reality, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the deeper we go, the more there is to uncover. Thank you for watching. Stay aware, stay questioning, and never stop seeking the truth.